CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Improvements to Hong Kong's election system among top priorities in sessions today of China's top political bodies. Equatorial Guinea. The death toll from a series of explosions at a military base rises to 98. And Senegalese President Macky Sall appeals to protesters for calm and peace as the opposition leader is released. Hello and welcome. You're watching Africa Live. We're coming to you live from Nairobi. I'm Hannah Viviers. Here are more stories making headlines this hour. In your business news, Eskom sets up a team to investigate racism allegations against its CEO. And in sport, Ahmed's FIFA ban reduced to 2 years, making him ineligible to run for re-election. We'll begin the hour in Equatorial Guinea, where the death toll from a series of explosions at a military base in the coastal city of Bata has risen to 98. At least 600 other people are said to have been injured during the incident. President Teodoro Obiang Nguema Mbasogo blamed the tragedy on negligence related to the storage of dynamite at the barracks. The presidency has called for investigations into the blast, as almost all the city's homes and buildings have been affected. The government is further calling for international support for search and rescue efforts, as well as to rebuild parts of Bata. Spain's foreign minister says that a shipment of humanitarian aid is expected to be immediately dispatched. Equatorial Guinea is currently experiencing an economic shock from the coronavirus pandemic, coupled with a drop in the price of crude oil. Well, Senegal's main opposition leader has called for much larger but non-violent protests. Ousmane Sonko made the call after days of deadly clashes, which were sparked by his recent arrest in the West African state. President Macky Sall has also called for calm and urged protesters to avoid confrontation. The opposition leader was freed from detention on Monday. Sonko was arrested on charges of public disorder when his supporters engaged police in a scuffle while he was on his way to court. Sonko also faces a rape charge, which he is dismissed as politically motivated. The charge emerged in February when an employee at a beauty salon accused him of rape. Sonko is considered the main challenger to incumbent President Sall.
J'invite au calme et à la sérénité.
Altogether, let's silence our bitterness and avoid the logic of confrontation, which leads to the worst. Let justice take its course in complete independence. That a generation faced with so many hardships expresses its unhappiness is quite understandable to me. At the same time, let's avoid participating in anything that delays us in the quest for a better future. When you ransack a business, you attack the good of others. You don't create jobs, you destroy them. You don't reduce poverty, you make it worse.
The International Criminal Court has ruled that victims of convicted Congolese militia leader Bosco Ntaganda should get a total of $30 million in compensation. Ntaganda was sentenced to 30 years in prison in 2019 for murder, rape, and other crimes committed in 2002 and 2003. The judges say he does not have the resources to pay the compensation himself. Instead, they've asked the tribunal's trust fund to help set up and finance vocational and other programs to support victims of his crimes, including child soldiers under his command, rape victims, and children born out of rape. Well, for more on reaction of this news from the DRC's CGTN's correspondent Chris Ochamringa joins us now from Kinshasa. We also have with us Njonjo Mue, human rights lawyer and transitional justice expert with the International Community of Jurists. Thank you so much for joining us both. Njonjo will be speaking with us via Zoom from Nairobi. Chris, let's begin with you in Kinshasa. What's the reaction to this ruling by the ICC, and what could $30 million in support mean for the victims of Ntaganda's crimes?
Well, Hannah, this ruling has been very well received by people in the northeastern province of Ituri, where these crimes were committed by Bosco Ntaganda's Union for Congolese Patriots militia between 2002 and 2003. The government hasn't issued a statement yet, but we know that President Felix Tshisekedi has been calling for an end to the conflicts in the eastern DRC and also justice for the victims who have suffered for a very long time. The authorities are saying that this is a step. It will send a very big message to all warlords in eastern DRC that impunity won't be tolerated. Hannah?
Jojo, let's come to you here in Nairobi. What's your take on the award by the ICC, both in terms of the amount and the manner it is to be paid out?
The amount, the order that was given by the judges yesterday will come as a great encouragement to the victims of Ntaganda's crimes. And it is obviously an unprecedented amount, being $30 million US. But having said that, as you mentioned in the introduction, ideally that amount should be paid by the convicted criminal. But in this instance, with regard to Ntaganda, he has been found not to have the resources, and he's an indigent person, in which case the Trust Fund for Victims is required to step in and complement that order that was given by the court yesterday.
Chris, let's bring it back to you in Kinshasa. Now, how has this ICC and the eventual conviction of Ntaganda impacted the North Kivu region, particularly the people and the victims, his victims in particular?
Well, it has had a very big impact. Like I mentioned earlier, North Kivu region has more than 100 rebel groups operating there. These rebel groups have been fighting over land, political representation, and the control of mineral resources. Now, this ruling is going to send a message to all the different rebel groups there that it may take long for justice to be served, but eventually it will happen. The long arm of the law will catch up with them, and so victims in that area are very happy that such decisions have taken by the ICC that favor people who have suffered, people who have been forced to flee their homes to neighboring countries. They have lost their their only means of livelihood. There are women who have been raped, men who were recruited as child soldiers way back in 2002. And so we have been made to understand that there's a charity that has been set up to support rape victims and men who were recruited as child soldiers and other people who lost their loved ones by Bosco Ntaganda's group. And Bosco Ntaganda was a very notorious rebel. He was known as the Terminator. He left the Union for Congolese Patriots back in 2003 and entered North Kivu area, where he became a leader of a group known as the M23, the M23 movement that captured Goma in 2012 and caused a lot of suffering to people. There was murder, there was rape, there was extortion of money. And so the victims of North Kivu are very happy that, finally justice is being served. Hannah?
Jonjo, let's bring it to you. When you just hear of all the things that Ntaganda did when it comes to rape, child soldiers, people that lost their lives, people that lost loved ones, no amount of money, I don't think, can compensate for any of the suffering that the people went through, even though this is very welcome. But what kind of precedence does it set for such cases where victims have waited so long for justice?
This sets quite an important precedent. Of course, we remember that it is not the first instance that the court has awarded reparations. In the case of Thomas Lubanda, who was also convicted of crimes in the Eastern DRC, the court awarded $10 million. The Trust Fund for Victims is going to implement this award. It does not have a lot of money in its resources. As of 2020, it only had $21 reserves, which were committed to other instances. But it is required to fundraise, and it depends on voluntary contributions from the states. So it is obviously the list that the court can try and do in order to restore the victims to their dignity. It can't bring them back to where they were before the violations, but it is important and it's symbolic in terms of bringing them back to rejoining their communities.
Thank you so much to the both of you for joining us. And Jonjo Mue was speaking to us from Nairobi. He's a human rights lawyer, and our correspondent, CGTN's Chris Ochamaringa, was speaking to us from DRC's capital, Kinshasa. Well, we start in China, where it's day 6 of this year's 2 sessions, the country's key political event of the year. The legislature, the National People's Congress, and its political advisory body, the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, are continuing their work. Among the topics addressed are a draft decision on improving Hong Kong's electoral system and work reports of China's top judicial bodies. On Thursday, the last day of the 2 sessions, Premier Li Keqiang will meet the press via video link. Well, cosmic rays are mysterious, high-charged atomic particles traveling through space at the speed of light. The rays have baffled scientists for years, but one political advisor believes the ability to see and study them could help generate interest in science and space among school children. Xiao Bing has the report.
This box is the Cosmic Ray Observatory. The flashing green lights on the display show the real-time result of the existence and route of the particles. This little lab was made by a group of students from Beijing Dongzhimen High School with the help of some of the country's top researchers. Cosmic rays, first discovered in 1912, have been an enigma for years, but their detectability means they can be studied by middle and high school students with the basic knowledge of physics. CPPCC member Yang Jia, also a professor and a member of the Jiusan Society, a democratic political party, has decided to make a proposal at this year's 2 sessions to further promote the study of cosmic rays on school campuses.
It's a wonderful idea. I heard a presentation from a scientist, Mr. Zhang Chuang. I was quite excited. In Los Angeles, there are already 80 high schools having a project like that, and in Italy, there are 50. But in China, we have just a couple of high schools doing that.
An organization called Campus Cosmic Ray Observation Collaboration was established in September 2020 to promote the idea. They plan to build more stations on school campuses across China, all voluntarily.
We work to set up more of the observation stations in the campus. And also we try to put out the existing data in the website so the students can use this data to carry on the cosmic ray study.
Although cosmic ray observation belongs to the field of frontier physics, experts say it is of different significance to introduce it to campus and popularize it among students. 79-year-old scientist Shen Changquan has guided the Dongzhimen High School workshop for 7 years since coming out of retirement. He says such activities can help increase young students' interest in science.
By exposing students to cutting-edge science, students can stand on the shoulders of giants and touch a wider world. It's not about them being scientists. It's just that a lot of advanced equipments today are with physics knowledge, and improving physics level of all people is very important.
Talking about the future of the proposal, Yang said she is looking forward to see more dialogue between top scientists and wonderful students in China.
We are optimistic about it, but still, from our practice, we know that there is a long way to go.
Yang adds, despite difficulties, the drive for humans to fully understand the unknown can never be stopped. Cao Bing, CGTN, Beijing.
Chinese investment in Africa's tech infrastructure continues to gain momentum. In most cases, Chinese developed technologies and innovation are now supporting the network infrastructure in several African countries. MTN and Vodacom are some of the top telecommunications players in South Africa using Chinese-built technology. CGTN's Tumini Naidu brings us more on this story.
African countries have realized the need for technological transformation and the benefits thereof for innovation, job creation and improved efficiencies. These African countries are turning to China to help them advance.
The relationship between China and Africa in the tech sector dates back at least 10, 15 years. And the largest project were launched back in 2005 and were mostly in the sector of infrastructure. Over the years, China has developed a relationship with almost every country in the continent. So there are many different layers in this relationship. The main one for a long time has been infrastructure development.
While Chinese brands like Huawei and ZTE have expanded their footprint across the continent, other Chinese companies are also creating easier access to new technologies by keeping products and services affordable.
Most of the times when it comes to any product, it is usually at a price point that leaves out some people. And in the case of Africa, we happen to be the some people. We don't have, all of these fancy things that we see in Europe and in America, because the price point here comes along now, China, with this technology that's taken advantage of this economy of scale and the rapid improvement of tech in using computers, that it gets to a price point that starts becoming compelling for us at a price for our pocket that we can afford.
China has invested heavily in 5G and Huawei is a big supplier in South Africa. Rain, a new player in the market, is also making 5G available to the lower income market, creating more affordable access.
The like of Huawei, again, have invested in 5G technology before many other big players. And there was a kind of like a perception, a strategic perception that it was going to be very difficult to compete on existing technology, 3G and 4G, because these was already being deployed by, let's say, legacy companies and Ericsson, Alcatel, and so forth.
The demand for new technologies is growing across the continent, and China is at the forefront of assisting with this transformation. Policy, though, remains a hurdle for some of these countries, delaying urgent investment and development. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Well, let's now bring in our guest, Ovigwe Ogwego, a policy advisor at Development Reimagined, an international development consultancy. He joins us live via Zoom from Abuja. Thank you so much for joining us. Just speak to us about how rapid advanced technological development has contributed to China's economic boom.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So if you go back to just about when China was opening up, you would see there was an influx, of foreign direct investment and also technological cooperation between China and several Western countries, particularly the US and European countries, and that significantly contributed, to making China a manufacturing powerhouse in the world. So when we think of China today as that major economic superpower, it's against the backdrop of technological advancement that, from Chinese own innovation and also technological cooperation, which has really given China that manufacturing, capacity. In in recent decades, you will see that even Chinese innovation has really shined through in particular, sectors like supercomputing, telecommunication, like we know with the popular 5G, where Huawei is a leading, equipment provider, robotics, and AI. So all of these shows that from the earlier stage, technology really contributed to making China a manufacturing powerhouse, and for future industries, you see that Chinese innovation and readiness to really be a leader in these industries as well.
Ovigwe, do you see China's technological advances trickling over into Africa?
Definitely. In fact, technology is one of those areas where there's a clear win-win outcome in the China-Africa relations. So when we think of, again, going back to, telecom, you would see that majority of Africa's, current 4G infrastructure, has been provided by, or it's built against or with Huawei's 4G equipment. And that is true for many, many African countries. We also still see that Huawei investment, ZTE investment in countries like Cameroon, where with state telecommunication, Camtel, I think, they were able to build a very sophisticated, modern, data center that empowers and drives innovation, and also allows the government to leverage on technology for security and on other areas. So in fintech is also one area where Chinese technological penetration or uptake has really contributed. For instance, you will see that you will hear so many reports about Africa's fintech potential, but that is only possible because of access to electronic devices like smartphones. And those smartphones, majority of the market is supplied by Transsion. So Techno, Infinix, these are the brands under that Transsion umbrella, and they control 40% of Africa's smartphone market share as at Q3 of 2020. So you have other players in like Oppo, Vivo, and Huawei as well, providing these devices that allow Africans to actually carry out that fintech. So in space, of course, there also is that trickling down or that sharing. In 2019, remember, Ethiopia launched its first remote sensing satellite, which from Chinese Long Mark 4B rocket. And the Chinese Academy of Space Technology developed that satellite in collaboration with 21 Ethiopian technicians and engineers. So the following year, there was also the second Ethiopian satellite was launched, and that also shows that in various tech subsectors, whether it's in telecom, fintech, and also in space, which is very, very important for African economies and where they are really lagging behind, you see that China-Africa cooperation really playing a crucial role.
Vigue, you've mentioned quite a few things, but how else can African countries take advantage of China's technological advances in order to fuel their own growth in critical sectors?
Yeah, I think one area where I'm really looking forward to more to happen within China-Africa tech cooperation is in energy. And there's a huge energy poverty in Africa, and China is in the world leader in solar energy technology. And in Africa, I would say is the world leader in solar energy potential, given our that we have so many days of the year where we have steady sunshine. Yet there is still energy poverty, and as we move toward that renewable, that clean green transition to power Africa, Africa's economy, you see that there is room for so much more to be done. Even within traditional energy sectors like dam, hydropower, and all, but solar energy is that area where China is really a global leader, and Africa has that so much potential. Already we see countries like Morocco, really moving forward with solar energy investments and cooperation. But for many of the African countries that have that solar energy potential, it is very important that African countries begin to look closely at how they can tap into Chinese ingenuity and capacity in this area. Also in 5G, because 5G, for instance, now is the next frontier in telecommunication, and many African countries would also need to upgrade their infrastructure for the telecom sector to really keep up. So you would see, for instance, all African countries and their telecom providers would also be looking for Huawei's equipment, because Huawei is a world leader, and also when you look at our price, it really fits into the budget of many of these telecom providers. So there are also sectors like manufacturing. African countries looking to become manufacturing hubs, like Ethiopia, for instance. So a lot of manufacturing base is built on certain technologies to carry out the manufacturing process. And China, having so much decades of experience as the world's leader or world's manufacturing powerhouse, it will be very, very impactful if African countries can also tap from that experience and those equipments that we can get from China to expedite our industrialization agenda.
Vigue, thank you so much for that. Vigue Ugwego, a policy advisor at Development Reimagined, which is an international development consultancy, and he was speaking to us live via Zoom from Abuja. Well, as China begins implementing a new 5-year plan launched at this week's 2 sessions in Beijing, many analysts are wondering what this development means for Africa. Yasser Hakim now takes a look at China's ties with Egypt and what is expected in those relations going forward.
China's ties with Egypt, just as with the rest of Africa, have been growing stronger over the years. Chinese investments in the North African country have increased from $500 million in 2014 to over $7 billion in 2020. Bilateral trade reached $15 billion from $1 billion in the same period, while tourism increased tenfold as well.
President Sisi went 6 times to China. And because 6 times means something, going to China 6 times within this short period means that the relation is strategic. We saw a lot of infrastructure projects and cultural things. And these cultural things, that's new, because now China, we all the time, we see China as concerned with infrastructure. Now, in Egyptian experience, we saw cultural concerns, such as fostering and promoting Chinese language in schools as the second language.
The coronavirus pandemic hit many world economies in 2020. However, China has been the only major power to post positive economic growth rates. And Egypt is one of the handful of emerging states to avoid economic contraction during this period. Unlike some other powers, China has maintained its commitments to Egypt during this pandemic.
In the health sector, a Chinese-Egyptian plant was opened in March 2020. It produces 500,000 masks per day and also exports the products to African countries. Another deal was signed for Sinopharm vaccine distribution and manufacturing to be done from Cairo. China continues its investments in the new capital, in the TEDA industrial zone and renewable energy projects.
China even expanded its investments in Egypt during the pandemic. It has started producing electrical vehicles, manufacturing textiles, and upgrading the railway sector in 2020.
China plans to continue efforts to support countries in their development, providing loans and debt relief for some African countries to ease their financial burdens. It is also aiding the South on digital transformation and infrastructure that helps developing nations to acquire 5G technology.
Meanwhile, the 2 sessions in Beijing have targeted a 6% economic growth rate for China in 2021, which analysts believe spells good news for the African continent.
Because of 6% growth, that means China is becoming the engine of the world. All the rival powers will be belittled in view of China. It's a great news because we need growth. We need a sound economy. And according to Chinese philosophy, economy is not in terms of an economic way. Economy, the full swing of the world, would lead life in a way that enable Egypt and Africa to grow, and China will be at the cornerstone of the world.
Experts believe there will be even more Sino-African cooperation in the future. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climate and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo,
Juba,
Johannesburg, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. You're watching Africa Live. Well, 16 influential journalists, filmmakers, and other public figures have signed an open letter calling on British authorities to reverse their ban on CGTN. Published by the No Cold War campaign and the Morning Star, the signatories include the award-winning journalist John Pilger, Oscar-winning director Oliver Stone, and legendary filmmaker Ken Loach. The media regulator Ofcom revoked CGTN's license to broadcast in the UK last month, saying that it was controlled by the Communist Party of China. But the letter says that as a state broadcaster, CGTN's status is similar to that of broadcasters including the BBC, France TV, and Japan's NHK. It calls the banning of CGTN an attack on free speech, which takes place in the context of the threat of a new Cold War against China. At such a moment, the letter says, it's crucial to build mutual understanding between peoples while denying a voice to China's CGTN hampers this. Well, Libya's House of Representatives is meeting in the coastal city of Sirte to vote on an interim cabinet. The new government is expected to lead the nation to elections at the end of the year. More than 130 members of parliament are in attendance. Interim Prime Minister Abdul Hamid Dibé last week presented his proposed cabinet made up of 33 ministers and 2 deputy prime ministers. Dibé is set to address Parliament this morning. The PM, who has until March 19th to win approval for his cabinet, said an approval was important for the nation's political roadmap. The new government, once accepted, is set to replace 2 rival administrations, one in the east and another in the west. Libya descended into chaos following the 2011 ouster of longtime leader Muammar Gaddafi.
The process of forming the government included strenuous efforts to obtain the best. The crisis today is a crisis of conflict and war, a crisis and participation, a crisis of acceptance, corroboration and support that requires realism and comprehension. Parliament should not miss the opportunity to unify the Council in this meeting, and this time in the nation's interest over both self and narrow accounts, and enable the government to direct the difficult tasks immediately and not to deport gaining the confidence to another stage, and thus blocking the path of electoral recommended by the Geneva outputs.
The House of Representatives received and circulated the formation of the government and the proposed plan, and the ministerial formation was discussed. Some said that it is an expanded government and it should be a small government. At the end of the session, the members of the parliament agreed that Mr. Abdel Hamid would be summoned to discuss the formation of the government.
Well, non-governmental organizations in Nigeria could face difficult times ahead as the UK government plans to cut millions of dollars in aid to poor and conflict-ridden countries. According to a leaked document, Nigeria could see aid from the UK cut by as much as 58%. Correspondent Deji Badmus reports.
An estimated 30% of Nigerians have no access to clean water and safe toilets. Worst affected are rural communities where, in most cases, people have to trek miles to get water from streams. But one non-governmental organization is making a significant contribution to address the problem in the country. WaterAid Nigeria is working in over 100 communities across 7 states of the country to provide water and safe toilets. The organization is one of the NGOs that benefit from aid from the United Kingdom. The UK's planned aid cut could therefore affect its operations in Nigeria.
We cannot project for now, but one thing we've tried to do all along is to diversify the funding portfolio as an organization, reach out to private sector, because wash is really everybody's business. Water is everybody's business. So we are hoping really that the effect will not be that bad, because really we need to do more of what we are doing more than ever before.
WaterAid is just an example of the potential funding challenge ahead for some civil society organizations and projects that benefit from aid from the United Kingdom. Data from the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office show that the UK has 53 active aid projects running in Nigeria across almost 20 sectors.
When you consider a lot of civil society organizations that are based, that are domestic, that depend more heavily on funding from foreign donors, international partners, then an organization like UKID, which is traditionally one of the major funding, sources of funding for intervention in governance issues, anti-corruption issues, service delivery issues, health, education, gender equity, and all of that. It's obvious that once you have less resources to do what you need to do, then you cannot do as much as you want to do. Meanwhile, the challenges are actually increasing.
Well, definitely, it is also a challenge for the local civil society to begin to ensure that the culture of charity is developed in Nigeria so that Nigerians can begin to pay for the causes they believe in. We cannot simply be passengers and expect others to pay for sensitization, capacity building, and the dissemination of knowledge in our society. So it will be a challenge to the CSOs as well as a challenge to the Nigerian society who wish to continue enjoying the services we render.
The UK's aid for Nigeria in the year 2020-2021 is put at £247 million. The bulk of the funding goes to the health sector. It's therefore ironic that the planned funding cut is coming at a time when Nigeria is in the middle of a massive health battle in the war against the coronavirus pandemic. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Well, police in Gauteng province of South Africa have arrested a number of people who have flouted COVID-19 rules and regulations. Gauteng serves as South Africa's economic hub. Restaurants and all other businesses that are not compliant with COVID-19 regulations are being shut down during an operation meant to ensure that people obey the rules. Let's take a look at Yulisa Njamela's report on this. Let's now continue to, we're now going to take a short break and return to business headlines, including Eskom sets up to team to investigate racism allegations against its CEO. And we take a look at how an Egypt campaign has helped empower women in the country.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Well, let's now take a look at what's happening in the world of business. The Board of State Power Utility, Eskom, plans to appoint an independent senior counsel to lead an investigation into allegations of racism leveled at CEO Andre Dureta. The council will interview any person with information to assist the probe and will give a report to the board to make recommendations. Dureta is accused of flouting procurement guidelines and racist behavior in how he deals with suppliers like black female-owned Econ Oil and contractors. Last year, the CEO was cleared of allegations that he misled the board in a decision to cancel fuel contracts. In July of 2020, Egypt became the first Middle East and North African country to launch the Closing the Gender Gap Accelerator. This marked an important step in the ongoing efforts by Cairo and the World Economic Forum to empower women economically. Yasser Hakim takes a look at what has been achieved so far through that initiative.
Several steps have been taken by the Egyptian government to empower women economically since the launch of the Gender Gap Accelerator last July. It includes more women taking leadership positions in private and public sector banks and companies, as well as supporting women-led SMEs.
This project is addressing, to a large extent, a major problem regarding the participation of Egyptian women in economic activities. Women in the cities and the educated women, they are doing quite well regarding their participation in labor market, but still these are minimal compared to the majority of women that are in rural areas, in the slums.
Although females make up half of the country's population, official statistics show they only account for 21% of the workforce.
Egyptian women are confronting severe problems regarding their participation in the labor market, the traditions, and sometimes they prefer to be married, and sometimes, their husbands refused for them to go to the labor market. Other social problems confronting families, Egyptian families, specifically in the slum areas and the rural areas. Illiteracy rate for women is high. The type of education they are taking in technical schools quite, weak and modest, and cannot enable women to, go to the labor market and to find opportunities that can, help them to survive and to have a good quality of life.
The government says it's addressing these issues. The Ministry of International Cooperation has set aside 13% of its funding for women's economic empowerment programs and another $3.3 billion from the World Bank to close the gender gap in the education and health sectors. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Well, over the past year, the pandemic has had an unprecedented impact on women's employment around the world. In the U.S., more women than men lost jobs or left the workforce entirely. Around the globe, similar trends are taking place that could push tens of millions of women into extreme poverty. Our UN correspondent Liling Tan reports.
In the early days of the pandemic, Deandra Sital was working at a restaurant in the Bronx in New York City.
And then that's when a lot of things were getting worse. And then they shut everything down restaurant-wise, like indoor dining. So that job got snipped.
When the city partially reopened in September, she found work at another restaurant. But that too was short-lived after indoor dining was again shut down. She hasn't been called back to work since.
It is a possibility that I wasn't called back because I have children, because I have liabilities. I have responsibilities different from my other coworkers that they don't have to worry about, especially with the remote school thing and the children being home.
In December, women accounted for all jobs lost in the U.S. at 156,000, while men actually netted a small gain. And as of February, government data shows some 2.5 million women have left the American workforce entirely, compared with 1.5 million men. And for women with families, school shutdowns and remote learning require alternative childcare arrangements or services that many cannot afford.
When those alternate arrangements are not there, they have to involuntarily or even voluntarily drop out of the labor force, which is what we are seeing in the US.
But it isn't just the US. The International Labour Organization reported that globally and across all income groups last year, job losses for women were at 5% compared with 3.9% for men. And the impact has been particularly severe in the developing world.
In developing economies, you see that the informal workforce is a much larger share of the total workforce. They have less access to social protection. They are also more likely to be working poor already. And they also have less access to digital technologies, which has been key in developed nations to continue their work.
All of this is expected to have long-term consequences for millions of women around the world. The UN says that when women drop out of the workforce, it's more difficult for them to return to work, which damages prospects for career advancement. And without formal employment, they don't contribute to pension accounts and lose access to important resources needed in their old age. The coronavirus's impact on women's employment is derailing hard-won progress made towards UN goals to achieve gender equality and end poverty. As it stands, the UN fears the pandemic will push 47 million more women and girls below the poverty line, in yet another long-term side effect of COVID-19. Liling Tan, CGTN, New York.
Well, Amazon has opened its first till-less shop outside the U.S. Campaigners have raised privacy concerns, though, about the store, which uses hundreds of cameras and in-depth sensors. But others say it's a landmark moment for the grocery store. Juliet Mann went shopping and sent this report.
Grab what you want and walk out. Yes, really. No checkouts, no queues.
I think it's quite seamless. It's a very efficient way of doing groceries, especially during COVID.
It was strange, not scanning anything, but it was good. It was fine, yes. Pity it wasn't bigger.
If this is the future of grocery shopping, it might take some getting used to. This feels a bit strange, just putting the shopping straight into my bag. Perhaps this is what a thief feels like. Already trialled in the US, this is the first convenience grocery store to offer Just Walk Out tech in the UK. Most of the technology is in the ceiling, so you can have a look. There are cameras and there are sensors all around here. It's very much like what they use in driverless cars, so motion sensors. So if I take something off the shelf, it knows if I put it back and only charges me if it's actually in my bag. It is completely cashless. All you need is the app, which charges your Amazon account and bills you later. Supermarkets have been enjoying strong sales during the pandemic, but it's online grocery sales that have been grabbing a larger slice of market share. So this move to bricks and mortar by Amazon, the world's largest online retailer, is interesting. Is it about saving the high street and supporting local producers by cutting out delivery costs? Or is this a shop window to showcase and sell the technology wholesale? That's arguably the Ocado business model. Created 20 years ago with the ambitious goal of revolutionising the online grocery market, Ocado now sees itself as a tech company rather than a retailer. It's done big international deals for its smart software, with retailers ranging from Marks and Spencer's in the UK to US supermarket chain Kroger.
Amazon is a technology company. Just look at the share price. The multiples in terms of their revenue and profit reflects that they are a technology company. It does not reflect that they are a retail company. So there is definitely something about a tech play here. But I think also Amazon is a very customer-centric company. And there is something also here about connecting with customers, about capturing more data about customers, and about understanding that customer journey more.
It's not quite the total surveillance shopping experience. There's no facial recognition, not yet. But it highlights how businesses can use consumer data and track what we buy. This space might be smaller than a typical supermarket, but the disruption potential is big. Juliet Mann, CGTN, London.
Well, let's not take a short break. The latest update from sport when we return, including Ahmed Ahmed's FIFA ban reduced to 2 years, making him ineligible to run for re-election.